Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PHLY Eagles podcast, Tuesday, March 26th, 5 p.m. at the tail end of the second and final day of the NFL's league meetings here in Orlando, Florida. Bo Wulf, Zach Berman, we're going to talk about Nick Sirianni's breakfast at 7:45 in the morning. What did he say? What did he not say about maybe projected starters along the offensive line? Is that a story? Is it not? Then, at about 2:10, 2:15, we heard from Jeffrey Lurie for what is usually the only time all year. He spoke for about 35 to 40 minutes on a wide variety of topics. Why did he keep Nick Sirianni? What's going to happen in Brazil? What does he make of the changes to the coaching staff? All that stuff. Lots to talk about. Zach Berman, how you doing?
Doing great. Excited for the show. I want to make sure that I have energy. I have juice. This is a big show. We hear from Jeffrey Lurie once a year. Here we are. We're on site. Bo was firing questions in. I was trying to sneak a few questions in.
We had some questions. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it was a good day. It's been a productive 2 days here, and I'm excited to discuss it with our audience.
I have a working theory just based on like the reaction or lack of reaction I saw on Twitter to Jeffrey Lurie speaking. Do you think that the Jeffrey Lurie press conference means more and matters more to the beat reporters than it does to the fans?
Well, I think most
the fans are more interested in hearing from Howie.
No, I actually think it's a good question, Bo. It's a good question. I think that the timing of it is what maybe bothers the fans. It's like this is why sometimes teams like kick something down the road, because if Jeffrey Lurie explained in January why Nick Sirianni was coming back, it would be of the utmost interest to the fan base, right? They would want all the same answers that he gave on March 26th. If he gave those answers on January 26th, they'd be huge. But now it's like people, whether they wanted Sirianni back or they didn't want Sirianni back, they kind of accepted it, and they've moved on to what's this roster going to look like and what's the draft going to be next year. But, I mean, there was a 3, 4, 5 week period there where Sirianni's future, should he stay, should he go, was it right to keep him? Like that was the topic. And so if Jeffrey Lurie had said then what he said today, I think it probably would have had more buzz among the fan base.
All right, well, let's get into it. Let's waste no time. I think we should start with Jeffrey Lurie, and let's just work our way through the press conference chronologically and touch on the things that he said, and then we'll get to Sirianni after that. Does that work for you?
Absolutely. I'm following your lead here, and that's a good match.
Well, let's start with a lunch that we had yesterday with several of the other beat reporters covering the Eagles here, and the topic was, what are we gonna hear from Jeffrey Lurie? What are some of the questions that need to be asked? How could we ask it in a way of getting a good response, or like what's a thing that he might not want to talk about? What might he want to talk about? And just some predictions of what he's going to say. And you need to know, like, who has been paying attention to Jeffrey Lurie the most over the years? Who knows what his agenda is going to be when he sits up there? And what does Zach Berman say at that table, at that Knights of the Round Table with all the, the iron-penned writers of Philadelphia? Zach says, I bet you that he is going to start by referencing the passing of Chris Mortensen. And what does he do? He starts with referencing the passing of Chris Mortensen as a lover of journalism, a longtime sports fan. That's how he got into it. He begins his press conference with paying respect to one of the greats in Mort.
Yeah, well, first off, that was very nice of Jeffrey Lurie. And the sentiment he had about Peter King, also very nice. And yeah, I think those are all genuine sentiments. He does care quite a bit about sports media. Like, Will McDonough was someone that he always held in high esteem. But I'll be self-deprecating here, but it's probably accurate. So that scene that you referenced in the past of Mad Men when they're on the elevator, and he says, I don't think about you, right? I'm the opposite with like Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni, like the amount of time that I spend thinking about them and what they're thinking and what they're doing, it would probably freak the crap out of them, right? So, yeah, I mean,
Not just them. I would say most people.
most people, yeah, I probably devote too much of my bandwidth, if you will, to what's going on in their minds, and I'm guilty as charged
And
there.
not
I
even
like,
what's going on in their minds, but just like knowing the tropes of the things that they say and how they say it.
yeah, like I would like to think that that makes me a good reporter. One could also argue it can make me like a sorry individual. It certainly depends
Wow.
on the context, but nonetheless, yeah, I do take yeah, I do think I have a good read on what Jeffrey would say.
An early birthday shout out in the chat to Sumac, who is a sicko and watches and listens as he falls asleep. So Sumac, wake up, dude!
Nice.
There you go. Happy
There you
birthday.
go.
All right. So the first, and then after paying respect to Mort and Peter King and mentioning Peter Gammons, who is alive, he
Very much alive.
he references Jason Kelsey and Fletcher Cox and talks about the contributions they've made over the course of their careers, obviously. And the first question is posed just generally about why'd you bring back Nick Sirianni? And he gives a very long answer here about all the things that they looked into. Obviously, he was not happy. He was, as we all saw on the screen, about how unhappy he was about the arc of the closing of the
Sure.
Eagles season. What did you make of the things he said here as he talked through the decision-making process to bring back Nick Sirianni?
Yeah, it really sounded as if Sirianni's commitment to changing the coaching staff. Now, he kind of talked about the ideas of changing the coaching staff, but that Sirianni's plan for how to fix this was what appealed to Jeffrey based on his explanation. We obviously aren't in the room, and he's had ample time to kind of workshop this. But
Now, let me ask you, if I can cut you off quickly.
Yeah.
In talking about this, he basically says that Nick brought him the idea of getting Fangio. And at the time, Vic Fangio is still an employee of the Miami Dolphins. Is that tampering?
Well, I'm sure I'm sure they're all in the same circles. I think we had spoken on the show about, we hear some weird things about Vic Fangio. What if he gets let loose?
Sure.
So,
but to 4 days after the season, bring it into the meeting. Like, I think I can get Vic.
Sure. Yeah, they still had a playoff game, right? I mean, they were still playing Kansas City at that point. No, that's a good point. But yeah, something else.
Just a thing that occurred to me.
I think more his emphasis too is that he doesn't want recency bias or latency bias, which is actually an interesting way of putting it. And he wants to take a look at what happened during the season, but the entire history over Sirianni's years. He cited this 31-7 record that Sirianni had in the 38 games before the collapse, and he didn't want to judge Sirianni just by those last 7 games, right, as opposed to those 38 games that came before. And we'll get to what he said about the season. I mean, he was not shy about like how disappointed he was in the season, but he still thinks that those characteristics he liked about Sirianni, the ability to connect, the authenticity, the work ethic, the football intelligence, he thinks all of those are present. He even said, like, the reasons that he hired Sirianni and the reasons why Sirianni was successful, and they were kind of magnified, like those didn't go away.
The authenticity, the connection, the work ethic.
Yeah, and the frustration of the season. So, look, one could say, did those skills atrophy? Just because you did it, does that mean you're going to do it? But he really did emphasize the plan that Nick had of wanting to improve the offense.
The story that he is telling is that he was unhappy and he was looking deeply into the question of whether to retain Nick Sirianni, and Nick Sirianni came in and was appropriately committed to changing a lot of things about the way that he was running the team on the football field, and that that caught Jeffrey, that hooked him, right? The story he is telling is that this was not necessarily an easy decision going in, but Nick made it an easy decision, and in the end, he had no qualms moving forward. I think we can probably agree that's not the whole truth, and he doesn't have to tell us the whole truth. And this is one where you can sort of weed around some of the things that he does say. And a couple answers later, when Tim McManus asked him about like what did contribute to the losing down the stretch, he talks about how even when they were 10-1, he was like, well, how are we doing this? We don't seem like a 10-1 team. We're not playing like a 10-1 team. And that I thought was really telling, because he can throw out the 37-9 or whatever the record is before the quote unquote collapse, and that's fine. That's good. That's good PR. But like the truth is, he knows that team was not that good, even though they were winning those close games. And so we all saw it on his face in the playoff game. Like, he was committed to serious changes, and Sirianni came in to that meeting committed to serious changes as well.
Yeah, I thought in his discussion about last season, what was interesting was comparing it to the 49ers and the Chiefs in particular. And he talked about how the 49ers and the Chiefs had resiliency, that they both went through bumps in their season, right? There was a point in the year with Kansas City in particular when it's like, man, have the Chiefs lost the fastball, right? But both those teams were resilient, and the Eagles were not resilient. And he was kind of adamant about that. So I thought that was an interesting framing, right? There are obviously ingredients that go into that, but I thought that was a good framing. I thought as far as kind of the action plan, the way that Jeffrey spoke about Kellen Moore, like, shows this was clearly they were talking about coordinator candidates, right?
And he put that on Nick as well. He said that was Nick's top choice.
Yeah. And whether, if that was Nick's top choice or if that was the choice recommended to him, if it was Nick's top choice, it's certainly convenient that Kellen Moore actually interviewed for the job that Nick has, back in 2021. And, the brain trust for the Eagles, if you will, Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, they knew Kellen Moore. They thought highly of Kellen Moore from that encounter. But the composition of the staff was important. The idea of becoming more creative, of becoming more innovative. And kind of, I'm putting a few questions together here, but when Jeff McClain asked him about, well, like, why would you go with a coach who's not calling plays, or have you ever had a coach who's not calling plays and it's like not his offensive system? Jeffrey actually pointed out that outside of Chip Kelly, he's never hired a coach with previous play calling experience. Now, the difference there, of course, is that Andy Reid called plays when he got to Philly. Doug Peterson called plays when he got to Philly, right? Nick Sirianni called plays for a few weeks,
but those were not. I think he's right that those were not preconditions of their hiring.
Yeah,
right.
So basically, his whole point is that he's not hiring a play caller. I don't have the exact terminology in front of me, but he said it well.
He said they're responsible for the play calling, but they don't have to be the one doing the play calling.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a cogent point, and I mean, I'll give Jeffrey credit for this. He's had press conferences in the past where, like, he says what?
I think we got a live chat from Reed.
That is, yeah. I was waiting for a time to interject, but yeah, the 507. Yes.
All right. Hi,
yeah,
Reed.
and also 507. He said, "Hey there, Dad." Reed's watching right now. He's very excited. My wife's texting me right now saying, "Can you read Reed's chats?" And I didn't want to disrupt the flow of our conversation.
Oh, now we got the whole chat saying hi to Reed. This is great.
Yeah,
everybody loves Reed.
He's pumped. Yeah, my 6-year-old son is he's getting really into this. Like, he asked me yesterday. I FaceTimed him, and he says, He says, "Who was the worst coach you talked to today?"
Ooh, great question.
Yes. Yeah. And then he
And what did you say?
saw me wearing my pass, and he said he wants my pass when I get home. And I said, "All right, yeah, I'll give you the pass."
Who was the worst coach you talked to yesterday?
Well, Andy Reid's the best coach, but like he was the worst in terms of answers.
Wow.
Like, yeah, I mean, I didn't think Andy's answers were very like, they didn't move the needle for me per se,
Okay.
but he's the best coach that I spoke with. But anyways,
Dennis Allen, maybe? I don't know.
I didn't speak to Dennis Allen yesterday.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. I spoke to Shane. I felt bad. I was like, I was the sixth person to ask Shane probably about Nick calling plays, and by that point or Nick seating the offense. By that point, he was done with it. Yeah. So in circling back to the what I'll give Nick or I'll give Jeffrey Lurie credit for this. He said press conferences in the past that we've discussed and that we've referenced where he says some things where it's like the level of spin or maybe not even spin, like the interpretation of facts kind of seems
generous.
Generous. I didn't think today that was the case. Now there was certainly like it might have been a sanitized version of events, but everything he said today, I thought seemed plausible, right? It's not like, well, that does not add up whatsoever.
Right. And it was all like, for instance, the thing from a couple years ago, right? When he's talking about his memory of the times he stepped in the draft, and the only times he's ever tried to put his finger on the pulse or on the scale was Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata and Russell Wilson. Like, come on. It's a little bit offensive in the storytelling of just not telling the truth. Whereas like the actual mechanics of what happened with, interviewing Nick Sirianni for his job at the end of the season, like it does him no good to tell us the full truth there. He can tell us his version of events there and open things up into interpretation. And I did not think that there was anything he said today that was like confounding in its like obvious lack of truth.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that.
Yeah,
I thought it was like I said, I thought everything he said was fairly plausible and
a lot of the things that he should say, like Nick Sirianni is his employee. He shouldn't be throwing Nick Sirianni under the bus. Like,
but on the topic of Sirianni, it was a good question from Elliot. It was one on my list about Sirianni's sideline demeanor. What did you make of Jeffrey Lurie's answer?
Well, this is another example of him being truthful, because he said, he doesn't want to strip Nick Sirianni of his authenticity. Part of the things that make him as good as he is are the emotion and the competitiveness and the competitive zeal, as you might put it, Zach.
Yep.
And like that stuff is all great, but there probably is a line that he doesn't need to cross, that he sometimes crosses. And he talked about like in conjunction with the refs, that may hurt them. And I thought that was good. And this is it's a little bit like the way that Howie talked about James Bradbury yesterday. Like he's willing to call out some of the things that we all know to be true.
Yes.
And it was the same thing when I asked about the defensive coordinator decision, to fire Desai and, well, not fire him, but to make Matt Patricia the defensive coordinator. And he said it didn't work. Obviously, it didn't work. Now he then talked about how he appreciated that Sirianni did not have the comfortability to stick with something if he didn't think it was working. And he talked, as we have heard, the referencing back to his first season when he took the play calling away from himself and gave it to Shane Steichen. Obviously, you and I think that those situations are not exactly analogous.
Yeah.
And certainly the results speak for themselves on that front. But him just being willing to be like, it didn't work. And also the sideline stuff, like he is willing to say a few things that we all know to be true, that like, Nick did not do well.
Yeah. And I thought the defense coordinator part, like you mentioned, was especially honest. That was a question from you, correct?
Yes.
That was a good question. And that like he was honest. Now I don't know if like Nick firing Desai or demoting Desai rather is this great example of like bravery as a coach, the audacity as a coach, right? I mean, especially because like it backfired.
Right.
And I don't know if the process was particularly sound either.
But we have talked about it a lot, but I would agree. It was not just that the results were terrible. It was that the process there was terrible as well.
Yeah. But like Jeffrey was on, like Jeffrey didn't try to spin it. He's like, it didn't work. Right. And it's very clearly didn't work. And I always think of you in this is that, like I recognize in all these interactions that these guys aren't going to tell you the whole truth, right? They're not under oath. It doesn't always serve their interest to tell the whole truth. But to quote Bo Wulf, like don't pee on me and tell me it's raining, right? So, my son.
Yeah, and I didn't think that there was that tonight.
Expression. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And a good point here in the chat from O'Doyle Rules 201, the same thing occurred to me, that when the Eagles reporters were asking Shane Steichen about the Eagles' offensive collapse yesterday, even Shane trotted out like, "Well, I'm pretty sure they were a top 10 offense for the second year in a row." Like at some point, Nick was like, "Hey, if you get asked, just mention we were a top 10 offense."
Exactly. Yeah. I heard
not good enough.
Yeah, I heard a funny story that like someone was like, who's that coach over there? He must have worked in Philly because there's like 5 Eagles reporters at his table. Right. And then it was Shane Steichen. Yeah.
All right. So moving on in the Lurie press conference, we have a question about Jalen Hurts. And Jeff McClain asked him about Jalen Hurts' regression, which, Jeffrey Lurie would not, give credence to. And, he's an outstanding young quarterback. He's talking about he was an MVP candidate last year, and again, like 2/3 of the way through the season this year, 25 years old. Now, this is the interesting thing. As we look back on like the narrative arc of like what the Eagles are trying to tell this offseason, it's the same thing that Howie said at the end of season press conference. All of a sudden, now Jalen Hurts is no longer the most mature 24-year-old we've all ever met. And, Jeffrey himself said it at last year's owners meetings. Now it's just, this is a 25-year-old. He's got a long way to go, a long way to grow.
Yeah. That's actually not the part that I take the most of exception to but yeah, you are right.
Not even exception. I just think it's interesting that they have come back down from that, right?
The talking point that I take the most exception to, and look, this is a consistent organizational one, because we've heard this now from Sirianni, now Jeffrey, and I think Howie might have said it, is when they were 10-1, Hurts was the front runner to win the MVP. Like, are you crowning week 11 MVP or like week 12 MVPs? Like that doesn't, are you saying, well, this guy had this guy led the team to the best record in the first 3 months of the season, therefore there's nothing to worry about? Like, was he not the quarterback when they went 6-7? Did he not or lose 6 or 7? Did he not have costly turnovers? Like, there is a little, there's some kid gloves to it, and I get it, right? There's personality dynamics here. There's a lot going on the field. There's a major investment in Jalen, and Jalen is a special player and a special person in that regard, right? Like, there's characteristics we've seen that very much give you the confidence. And I don't think last year was. I mean, it's not like Carson Wentz's regression, right? Like his down year was still pretty good. But
I actually do find the word regression a little bit unfair. He didn't have as good of a year, but it's not like he looked like a totally different player. I don't know.
I just don't like this idea of like well, in week 11,
I agree.
He would have been, or if he just got the ball back in the Super Bowl, he would have been Super Bowl MVP. Like, there's, I mean, to me that's very much like that 3-year narrative that the Eagles had. Well, if Alshon doesn't drop the pass, they go on and they win the Super Bowl, right? Or they go on to make the Super Bowl. Like, come on, let's deal in reality. You can't just tell me. You can say that we're looking at the entire body of work, but don't tell me that this guy would have been the MVP. Like, who wins the MVP based on what they do in September, October, and November? They always remember what you do in December.
Good point. And, with respect to Jalen Hurts, maybe the conversation is not, what is the ceiling? We've seen the ceiling in the Super Bowl. Maybe the question is, what's the floor?
Yep.
And if you want to know what your floor is,
Great transition.
well, Empire Today will help you out, because with Empire Today, you get shop at home convenience, the right product for your needs, quick and professional installation, and a price match guarantee. Empire Today is the best place to get new flooring, and that means because they're the best, they're going to have copycats. But those copycats cannot beat Empire Today when it comes to quality, service, and speed. So what they're going to do, those imposters, they're going to advertise low quality products that Empire Today wouldn't even carry. Empire Today will not promise the lowest prices, because anyone who does that is putting flooring in your home that they wouldn't put in theirs. What Empire Today can promise is the best product. That's what you're going to get with Empire Today. Shopping for floors at a big box store can be frustrating. You might talk to someone today who was working in plumbing yesterday. Flooring is all Empire Today does. They live and breathe flooring. You might think that hurts your back to be down on the floor all day long, but they do that for the love of the game and for helping you, the customer, so that you can be confident that you are getting honest, upfront advice. Schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners can receive a $350 off discount when they use the promo code PHLY. Restrictions apply. See empiretoday.com/PHLY for details.
My first league meeting was in 2013. Here we are in 2024. A lot has changed over the years. One thing that has not, though, is the great taste of Miller Lite. When I'm out there and I'm trying to hang out with Bo Wulf when he's hobnobbing with all the NFL bigwigs, what I turn to is the original light beer. And to this day, it's still the best one. Miller Lite has more of the taste you want and less of the stuff you don't. It's these moments in life that matter most when you turn to Miller Lite. You're having the conversation there. You're bonding with your friends like Bo. And you know what makes it better? That Miller Lite. You can spend less time thinking about what you're drinking and more time drinking with friends.
Miller Lite with your friends.
You said that, not me. And the great thing about Miller Lite is the taste, right? It's the best light beer. It has that great taste, but it's less filling, and it has that clean finish. And the reason is because Miller Lite keeps it simple. There's undebatable quality, great taste, and only 96 calories, which is increasingly becoming important. It's the beer that strips away everything you don't need and holds on to what matters most. It's a light beer that tastes like beer. Less filling, like I said, only 96 calories, the original light beer since 1975. Times change, but you can always enjoy the great taste of Miller Lite. Tastes like Miller time. To get Miller Lite delivered right to your door, visit MillerLite.com/PHLY-birds, or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 96 calories per 12 ounces.
All right, Zach, let's keep bouncing around a little bit. What did you make of Jeffrey's answer when, I believe it was Elliot, asked him about, is Nick on the hot seat? He's got a couple years left in his deal. Everybody thinks that he's on the hot seat. Kind of a bit of a tepid endorsement there from Lurie, I thought.
A tepid endorsement how? Like it was, I thought it was a fairly honest answer.
It wasn't
right?
forceful. Yeah. It was an honest. Yeah. I thought that was an honest answer. Yeah.
Yeah. That's my
if things don't go well. Yeah. That might be it.
Yeah. They always have to prove themselves. And it's interesting. It's interesting to juxtapose it, by the way, to Doug Peterson in 2020. I'm going into 2021, because if you recall that year, when Jeffrey spoke about the difference in vision, one thing he said is that like Doug would need to maximize this season to keep his job, right? And the Eagles needed to kind of take that step back, and those two things couldn't work in alignment. The Eagles are not in that position right now, right? I think that like Nick needs to maximize this season to keep his job, and the Eagles have the expectation that this is a season that can be maximized. And that's why they've made the moves that they've made, right? That's why they, I think there's a feeling in, I've received a few questions via social media about, why weren't there more questions about Howie Roseman putting this roster together. And I kind of got the distinct interpretation from what Jeffrey Lurie was saying, because Jeffrey brought up Howie unsolicited. He's like, you guys haven't asked me this, but this is something we've said all along. They very much view this as a coaching thing. They don't view this as a.
I think we actually probably should have asked that question though. We've talked about Nick, but were there any roster construction issues that you felt contributed to the collapse last season? We probably should have asked something.
Yeah, but he brought up unprompted the way Howie.
Yeah, I think we sort of know how Jeffrey feels about Howie, but I think that is probably a reasonable. I think we could have done that.
But my point is that I think they view it this is a roster that can win. I think they thought last year's roster could have been better than it was, right? And that was a flawed roster, but it was a roster that won 11 games and that was in cost. They lost some games that they could have won late this season. And I think going into this year, and we'll have ample time to talk about it on the show and future shows, they think they got a lot of talent on this team. And so it's up to the coaching staff to maximize it.
Yes. A question about Hassan Reddick, which I think we can gloss over. He said something about he's a great Philadelphia guy. We think we'll have a good resolution there. We'll see how that goes. He was also talking about the way that they structure contracts gives them a strategic advantage over the rest of the league. Then you asked him about Saquon Barkley, and in conjunction with the way that he has always talked about the passing game being more important than the running game, why is it that Saquon Barkley made sense for them? What did he say there?
Yeah, so there are two parts of this answer that's interesting. One's kind of the Saquon talking point, and the other is the way they're looking at the running back position. And one thing he says is that they're looking for market inefficiencies, right? Is there a position that's undervalued? Is there a position that's overvalued? And he actually used kind of the X for Y comparison that we talked about on yesterday's show. He didn't mention Darnell Mooney by name, but he said, if this is the money that you're spending on Saquon, and that same money's going to a player at a different position, who's not of Saquon's level, who would you rather give it to? As far as Saquon, he said they don't look at it as a running back. They look at it as an all-purpose back. And Saquon's ability to catch the ball, Saquon's ability to just how he's the exception is kind of the way they frame it. They keep bringing up LaShawn McCoy and Brian Westbrook.
Yeah, come on.
I wrote this. We talked about it. I'll say quickly, I think this is false equivalency. LaShawn McCoy was 24 years old when they gave him a contract extension. Brian Westbrook had never had more than 250 touches in a season when they gave him a contract extension, whereas
and it's two guys in 20 years.
Yeah, and Saquon Barkley's had 3 seasons with over 250 touches, and he's going into his age 27 season. So they're really counting on Saquon to be exceptional. And I think I think the first part of the answer was a big focus here. And Howie mentioned that maybe the pendulum has swung too far in the other way with running backs. I saw Joe Banner tweet something when the Eagles signed Saquon that you have to look at, when you look at percentage of the salary cap, it's pretty low relative to what you think of that type of contract for a running back. And I think that's how they saw it. I think they saw, I wouldn't call it an inefficiency, but I think that there's they view it like there's a market correction almost at that position coming. And that for a player like Saquon, this is a reasonable price to pay.
Just bouncing around, I think a few of these things we've already covered. You asked him about Brazil. What did he say there?
Yeah. The Brazil thing. I was curious. I might have framed it in a way that was a little too forgiving, or I wouldn't even say forgiving, but anyways, I've asked him multiple times over the years about international games, and you always make that joke with me. He mentions some city. I forget the city's name.
Yeah, I forget what it was.
Yeah. I ask him this all the time, and his point in the past was they're really interested in this. They don't want to give up home games. Then the league changes that rule, basically. Well, they make the rule that you have to give up a home game once every 8 years.
And they added a game. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he said, all right, well, if they're going to go international, here's the chance to like be the first team to go to South America. They thought that was a good opportunity for it. And now they're kind of, they don't have to give up a home game over the next 8 seasons. Right. So that it sounded as if, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounded as if they wanted to be the Brazil game as opposed to now we don't know the order of operations. Maybe the league came to them and they were agreeable to it, but it sounded like this wasn't something that they offered much resistance to. Like this is something that interested Jeffrey.
I mean, I think he's generally interested in it, but I also think this is one where he's not going to say something else. He's
Gotcha.
not. If he didn't want this game, he's not going to say, I tried to get out of this game and I wasn't able to. Right.
True.
And my understanding is there are a lot of logistical issues with this trip for the Eagles that the organization itself is a little bit worried about. So,
but Jeffrey, in these settings, he always he likes to talk about big picture football stuff when he can. And he was kind of honest that football has a lot of work to do internationally, right? That it's the most popular sport in America by a wide margin. But that's not the case internationally, and they need to make strides. And the Eagles have international territory rights in Australia, New Zealand, and Ghana. Right now, I'm not anticipating a game in Ghana in the near future. I'm not anticipating a game in New Zealand in the near future. I could see one in Australia in the next. I could see the next time they give up a home game, maybe 8 years from now, is in Australia. But let's start prepping now. PHLY, right? Yeah. But yeah,
back to Adelaide.
Yeah, but I kind of felt like, from my perspective, I've asked him this question. Some people ask the Kelly Green question for all these years, like you can't ask it anymore. I've asked the international football question to him 3 or 4 times, and now they're finally hosting a game. I felt like, all right, I should use. I don't want to say use a bullet. I should use one of my pitches here on that.
I asked him about Dom just because they were talking about the sideline, and he called him one of the outstanding executives in the NFL. Yeah. So hopefully Dom's got a raise coming up.
Dom bet. I mean, I don't know if Dom needs a raise as much as he needs a marketing agent, because he's as popular as anyone on the team right now.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
A super chat from Nathan says, please tell Howie to stop using the phrase tools in his body. Nathan thinks it's weird, and he's the only one who does it. Why can't he be normal and just say physical tools or athleticism?
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. Have some fun with that, though. Like, we could say tools in his body, and then it's an X-ray, and there's like a wrench in the, it's like a operation.
Could you imagine if like I say before the next press conference or next time I see Howie, by the way, Nathan just wants you to stop saying tools in his body. Could you do Nathan a solid there? Yeah. No, it's some people have expressions that they go back to all the time. I'm certainly guilty of it myself. When I have a 3-hour drive tomorrow, I'm going to listen to the show back, and I imagine there are going to be things that I cringe at for expressions that I overuse. But that is one that Howie uses quite a bit.
He gave a shout out to Michael Clay for the special teams, and also because of that, Sirianni for having the.
He got his facts wrong.
He got his facts wrong. He did. Yeah. Nick Sirianni did not inherit Michael Clay.
He didn't pick Michael Clay, perhaps.
Right. Michael Clay was brought to the staff.
Yes,
not necessarily. Sirianni didn't know Michael Clay. He was the one guy on the staff who he didn't know. But yeah, he did not inherit him, but he did think that he was a very good coach.
Yeah.
And, stuck with it. And there he is. And he saw the fruits of that. And that's part of the reason he said, I really I trust Nick and I trust Howie. That was his underlying message in that answer.
And a quick tease. I don't know if we'll get to it today, but something that on the show with Rich Hoffman tomorrow, we're going to discuss is, these rule changes. Michael Clay is he's going to have an important job here. Right. I mean, the kickoff change is really going to change the dynamic of kickoff returns, and it could be a big play in the league. So I'm eager to hear Michael Clay's thoughts on it.
Yes, and I will let you and Rich talk about that over the course of the rest of the week. But I'm excited to see how that plays out. I imagine from talking to some people around the league, like you can play like some of your defensive starters on that play because you don't have to run down the field, right?
Sure.
At least when you're in coverage.
And that's what Jeffrey said today too, by the way. When he talked about the kickoff rule, he didn't say defensive starters, but he says it basically becomes like an offensive or defensive play now.
Right.
Yeah.
And he said the thing to what we talked about yesterday about like credit to the league for acting on these things when they see an issue. So he sort of brushed aside the tampering accusation on the Saquon Barkley front. He trusts the league's process, but they've got nothing to worry about. This was sort of like the end. People were just sort of checking boxes. Isaiah Rodgers, they expect to be back at some point. The kickoff rule, streaming. You and I disagree about this.
Yeah,
I think this is just making things more difficult for people, but they got to make their money.
I should clarify. I do agree. It makes it more difficult, right? Like I was trying to find something the other day, in the hotel. It's much harder. When you're at home, you have all your like streaming networks or whatever on. In a hotel, I was trying to find something. It was much harder. I'm just saying, like I said, this is how content is consumed. And we should say, by the way, the league announced that the season opener in Brazil is going to be on Peacock. Now, if you're in the Philadelphia area, you'll be able to watch it on NBC. But I know we have audience all around the country, and if you're not in the Philly area, you will need to be a Peacock subscriber or go to like a sports bar or something like that to watch the Eagles game against either the Packers or the Browns.
Yes. So I'm still hoping we get Michael Dunn in that Speedo, but
is that a thing? You wear Speedos in Brazil?
I think you're allowed to.
Okay.
You're welcome to.
Yeah. I will pass on that. Yeah.
Not if you want the numbers to rise.
I don't know about that, but all right.
Last thing I think we should talk about in terms of just his answers, unless you want to have a general overall thought, was the Philadelphia, like the arena situation. What was his tea there?
Yeah, so that's it. So we were talking about this at lunch yesterday, actually. And the Phillies, John Middleton announced last week that the Phillies are joining Comcast Spectacor with the proposed project in South Philadelphia for the mixed use and kind of the whole. I mean, the renderings look amazing, although I'm skeptical here because I once saw renderings of Xfinity Live that look a lot different than it is now. But the Phillies are joining forces, and so are the Eagles doing it, and because obviously the Eagles have considerable clout, and he says they're always kind of corresponding with the Phillies and Comcast, and that they consider themselves partners in the stadium complex, but they're not involved in that project. He says they have 8 to 9 years or so on their lease, and they have to do what's best for the Eagles. And so that's interesting. That's something that we will need to follow up on, right?
Yes.
Does that mean a new stadium? Does that mean they're
I forget which stadium it is, but there's one that's being redone that was opened in '99, and that's only 3 years before the Link opened. I believe that was to Greg Richards.
So the Browns, which were an expansion franchise in '99, they had a new stadium then. And they actually made, similar to the Eagles, they made a lot of renovations. Like when Joe Banner was there, they made renovations to it. But I saw today a report that they are purchasing land kind of in the Cleveland suburbs to build, a potential dome and like mixed use around it. And that seems to be if you follow stadium construction and that kind of thing. And I follow it with a certain degree of interest.
Fancy it's a little bit of a construction file.
No, stadium. I'm curious about stadiums. That's like I've heard and seen a lot of people kind of point to what the Atlanta Braves did with Battery Park, what the Patriots have done with Patriot Place, where you have the stadium, but then like the team also has all this stuff around the stadium that they control, and they try to make it a destination. I mean, that's in essence what the Sixers are trying to do, right? On Nathan Market. So I frankly don't know what the Eagles' plans are, but it's something that we should definitely monitor here in the next. Look, there's a lot of time on their lease here, and I'm not saying this is what they're going to do, but Jeffrey did say they had to do what's best for the Eagles.
All right. Well, if you want to get tickets in 10 years to an Eagles game in Bryn Mawr, well, you might have to go to Game Time. But until then, Game Time is going to hook you up for opening day. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. So with killer deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And guess what? Opening day's coming up, people. And they've got a deal for you. First pitch is the code, and it's going to get you $20 off a ticket to a baseball game from March 25th to April 14th. Game Time is your place for last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They've got the flash deals. They've got the zone deals where you can save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats for you. They've got the all-in pricing, so you don't have those surprise fees at checkout. They've got the seat view, so you know exactly what it's going to look like when you're sitting down at the game. And they've got the lowest price guarantee. All of these things, that's all just part of the deal. That's just as it comes. And they've got the Game Time ticket coverage, where your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. For a limited time, all users can get $20 off any MLB purchase of $150 or more in the Game Time app with code FIRSTPITCH, all one word. Terms apply. That's code FIRSTPITCH for $20 off from March 25th to April 14th only. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Yeah, you mentioned opening day, and I'm going to let you spend some time with your family this week, so I won't bother you. So I'm going to say ahead of time, happy holidays, because celebrate one of the best holidays of the year with us, and that's Philly's opening day. PHLY is giving away tickets to the March 30th Saturday game. That's this game coming up this weekend. Section 210 against the Braves. And another pair of tickets to the June 3rd game, Section 210, when Reese Hoskins and I would say Jackson Chorio returns against the Brewers. Join our very own crew, our PHLY Phillies crew, for a pregame live show and watch party at South Philadelphia Race and Sportsbook. Our friends at Miller Lite will have 16-ounce can specials from 11:30 a.m. the closing. Also, courtesy of our friends at Coors Light, we are hosting our first of many Sixers watch parties. Join us at Deke's Barbecue on West Berkeley Street when the Sixers take on the Cavs at 7:30. Show up and enter a raffle to win 2 tickets, Section 116, Row 13, to the April 9th Sixers versus Detroit game. Deke's will be offering $3 20-ounce drafts all night long. Check out all of our upcoming events at allphly.com under the events calendar to RSVP. And when you're there, sign up to become a diehard because we have great content there. Bo's free agents rankings are still applicable. There's still some guys lingering. We're going to have awesome draft coverage coming up, much of which will be in the diehard tier. And you also get 20% off events. You get merch discounts. You get a free shirt when you sign up. So become a diehard as well.
Speaking of diehard, how about the NFL having Hans Gruber announce that the Eagles game is going to be on Peacock?
Did they? I don't think they had a Hans Gruber. I don't even know who Hans Gruber is, but let me look this up here. Is this a safe thing to look up?
Yeah, just don't put hentai at the end.
Hans Gruber, okay. He's a fictional character and main antagonist of Die Hard. I've never seen Die Hard. So on that. It's
a great movie.
Yeah, but it's a Christmas movie, right?
Well, that's
debate. That's like a big debate. Yeah, I'm aware of the debate. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on Jeffrey Lurie that you would like to talk about?
Well, we mentioned Jalen quickly when you spoke about the maturity angle of it, right? And the thing he did say, because it was asked like, does Jalen need to become a more outgoing leader, if you will, especially now that Kelsey and Cox aren't there. And he said that Jalen needs to be his authentic self, but like people do grow up. And then the Cox Kelsey thing, he said they're going to honor them in the near future. I didn't know what that would entail. I didn't know if that means, look, like I think it's safe to say no one's going to wear 62 again, right? I imagine no one wears 91 again.
Well, that would be very funny if they held 87 for so long and then
but like I mean, there's some numbers they haven't given out LaShawn McCoy's number, but it's not officially retired.
Yeah,
I imagine Kelsey's officially retired. Like
so,
they
too.
will. Yeah, the 62. I imagine they officially retire that, similar to like the last guy they retired was McNabb and Dawkins, and so. But we've talked about this. The Eagles can't keep retiring numbers because
right, if they're going to do 62 and 91 and 55, and then
they're not giving out 9. They're not giving out 9. Like C.J. Gardner-Johnson, he wore or he picked number 8 because that was actually the last single digit available to get. Now number 7 might soon be available, the Hassan Reddick jersey, but you got like, this is what I would have. Look, the Eagles have a great equipment staff. They do an awesome job, and I actually did a piece back in 2016 on how players get their numbers, and it's like a real kind of complicated process at times. But I wouldn't have given 10 to Braden Mann. I would have said, like, there's probably a high profile player who's going to want 10. I'll give you like a 38 or like a 46 or something, like 40. Yeah,
you can change in the offseason though, right? You don't have to do the release.
Yeah, but like, why is Mann going to change? I mean, he's already got it.
Well, I mean, does he want to keep his job?
Well, he just got an extension. Yeah.
Well, I know, but
but like the 10's a premium number.
Maybe that was in the details of the contract. You don't know that.
Yeah, that's true. So anyways, but yeah, no, I did burn the last question because I wrote down like on my laptop when
he said
that, what are they doing specifically for it? And I didn't now, I probably would have announced it at the top, so I probably shouldn't have burned a question on it, but I was curious if they had something specifically planned.
I thought it was a good Jeffrey Lurie performance today.
Yeah, I would agree. He only does it once a year, so like, the stakes are high, but I thought he was good, and I tend to think that, and I said this afterwards to a few people, like Nick Sirianni, really nice guy, like Nick, but you can talk to Nick for 30 minutes and say, like, I learned 3 things, right? I mean, Jeffrey Lurie, it's much more substantive.
Yeah, but I don't know how much we actually truly learned from Jeffrey Lurie, but just to be able to hear from him.
Sure. Okay.
Is important. Speaking of that, we talked to Nick Sirianni this morning. We have some of the highlights from that with the full answers there on our YouTube page if you want to watch that and get the nitty gritty yourself. But it actually seemed like the most interesting thing to come out of this, Zach, and you tell me whether this is a thing or not a thing, was a question you asked about the right guard situation and like, where do they stand at right guard? And Nick brings up Matt Hennessy and some of the young guys who haven't had a chance and are going to get a chance to play, and doesn't mention Tyler Steen. Is this the case of it's 7:45 in the morning? The man was at the party last night. He's answering questions from all different areas, bouncing back and forth between, Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio and Hassan Reddick. And all of a sudden, here's a question about right guard. Tyler Steen just slips his mind. Or is this indicative of maybe Tyler Steen is not the front runner at right guard right now?
Yeah, I think both can be true. And like, I do think there's a degree of what you said, that he's up there. He's getting a bunch of different questions. He's tired. Like there's no flow to this, and a name just kind of slips his mind. I once asked I think it was about left guard to Doug Peterson, and he mentioned like Jason Peters and Jason Kelsey, and he did not once mention like Matt Tobin, who was, or I'm sorry, not Matt Tobin, Alan Barber, who was like expected to be there left guard. I believe it was. But anyways, the flip side to this is if you say to me, who's like your starting out, your starting shortstop on your fantasy baseball team, right? Like, I wouldn't tell you it's Bobby Witt, right? Like I could, if someone's front of mind,
you got a bit of a thing for Bobby Witt.
Yeah. But if someone's front of, like, the fact that he didn't even jog to mind, and he gave like a 4-minute answer, like, but
when has he not given a 4-minute answer?
But I will give him the benefit of the doubt that he meant to include him. But look.
Yeah. I mean, this is like this is one of the most ridiculous parts of the job is like spending a lot of time parsing an answer that somebody gives when it could, if you were to parse something that you or I said for 4 minutes, you could pick it apart in all these different ways, and it might be something and it might not be anything. But I did think that it was interesting that like Nick Sirianni must be going to bed at night thinking about his offensive line. And if that was the case and Tyler Steen is in his mind as the right guard next season, I think that he would have mentioned Tyler Steen. And so,
and so to build off that, if let's say we give him the pass on my question, he meant to say Tyler Steen, right? Jeff McClain follows up. Do you view Tyler Steen as a guard? And like, if this is the guy who you're expecting to be your right guard, you're like, I mean, yeah, like we're gonna get, he's gonna be in this mix at right guard. Even when that follow up question came up, Nick was like, well, he's a guard or tack. He's versatile. We like versatility. Jeff Stoutland's going to pick the guys that he likes the most.
Drafted him in the 3rd round last year.
Yeah. And the reality is this. They had a chance to start him last year when they started Suopeta over him. And this was someone who was effectively the Eagles' 2nd round pick. I know he's not their 2nd round pick, right? He was top of the 3rd round, but they trade, he was their 3rd draft pick last year. Let's put it that way. He was their top pick on day 2 of the draft. Okay. So I shouldn't say effectively their 2nd round pick, because if you're either a 2nd round pick or you're not, but he was a high 3rd round pick who was drafted with the expectation of like developing into a guy who could start. That was the thought on draft day. That's a pretty high pick, right? And so one would think that not just would he be in the mix, he'd be the front runner for it, and he would kind of be front of mind for that. So yeah, we can kind of, I guess on March 26th, and happy birthday to my brother, Matt. It's his birthday, by the way.
Happy birthday, Matt.
Yeah. But on March 26th, we can say, all right, Nick, you got to pass. Like, a lot going on this morning, but this is something
we're the second oldest of the Bermans.
Second oldest of the Bermans after Josh. Yep. But this is something that I'm definitely keeping in the back of my head, that first rep of the all-season program, or of the of the OTAs, who's at right guard. I would hope, if it's not Tyler Steen, that's a story, unless they draft someone in the 1st round.
I agree.
Yeah.
Josh, Matt, Zach, Alex, Nick, Jenna.
Correct. Yep.
Bang.
Yeah.
Anything else from Nick Sirianni?
Saquon Barkley continuing and we said this in our video before, that he's kind of comparing it to when they acquired AJ Brown, where like they go back and they put plays in the offense for that specific player to accentuate him, and like that's how they're viewing it now. The pro like Saquon Barkley argument wasn't fortified when he was asked about them caring about a running back, because he's like, in the past 2 years
about running backs, we had Pro Bowl running backs each of the past 2 years.
Yeah,
buddy, that's the point.
That's the point, is that you have a top offense with guys who you replace each year, right? And so maybe you don't need one that you're spending $13 million on, but perhaps that elevates you to a different level. The Kellen Moore thing.
I thought that the coordinator dynamics was the other thing I think we should talk about. He was asked about Kellen Moore and how they're going about building out that offense, and he said that like the process itself is not too different, but he said he is not in those meetings all the time. He has other responsibilities, and so Kellen Moore is putting the offense together. He's a part of that process. Sirianni is, but he is not the main guy. And then he was also asked about how much, power does Vic Fangio have? How much autonomy does he have over the defense? And he's like, Vic's been doing it a long time. Jonathan Gannon and Sean Desai were both sort of first-time coordinators. Desai had 1 year under his experience.
Yeah.
But this guy's been doing it a long time. I'm going to talk to him about some situational stuff that I care about. But other than that, that's Vic's show.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And that's very clearly expressed about Vic. And you're curious the autonomy that Kellen Moore has. But, he, like you said, he's the captain of the ship, if you will. So that's the expression for Kellen Moore. One other thing, and this might be more interesting to me than it is to everyone else or to the fan base, but I am tracking what is different this year, because one thing, if you recall, Nick Sirianni said early in the season, like maybe they need to play their guys more in the preseason, right? When they were a little rusty. And he said they're going to reevaluate how after the Patriots game, he said that they're going to reevaluate the way they do the preseason. And one thing I was curious about is if they're going to do anything different in the offseason program. They practiced the least amount of any team in the NFL last year. They didn't take advantage. They didn't have a mandatory minicamp. They didn't take advantage of their full allotment of OTAs. Those are legitimate practice opportunities that you can get, that they said, that they felt they're getting the work they needed. They had a long season.
I thought that was just because they went to the Super Bowl.
Well, the year before was a similar thing, though.
But it was a little bit more, right?
It was a little bit more, but yeah. So they peeled back. So anyways, this year, when the season ends earlier, and they have a new offensive scheme, and they have a new defensive coordinator, it would make sense for, and they have new position coaches, and they have a new center on offense, right? That's a big deal here. It would make sense for them to practice more,
I would imagine,
this spring. And so Nick said they are going to make some changes, that they'll have their schedule when it comes out. But that's something that has been on my radar, just because they really didn't have much of an offseason program last year. They had a shorter offseason program than everyone else the year before that as well. And even in if you remember in Nick's first year, it was kind of like a compromise with, they were under kind of COVID rules. And he's like, all right, if you guys come in for this, we won't have the mandatory minicamp. They didn't have the mandatory or something like that. So, my
general take here is, I don't think they're going to change too much, because you could say they were rusty in week 1, but guess what? They also had good health, generally speaking, for the second year in a row, right? And so obviously you would trade, and it's not this easy, but you would definitely trade some rust early in the season, even if it's a new scheme, for keeping guys on the field. And if the data that they follow tells them that this is going to help that is the number one priority. Maybe it means more walkthroughs or something like that in the way that they do stuff in the spring. But I think they're going to do more than last year, because they didn't have to play 3 extra games and play deep into February. But I don't think that they're all of a sudden going to be, running Oklahoma drills on, June 8th.
No, I don't think they'll run Oklahoma drills either. So,
okay. What else you got?
Well, there's a lot, but I want to be respectful of you. Your family's here. You got
some more. You got some more shows to fill this week.
I got some more shows. I'm excited. I'm with Rich for virtually Wednesday, Thursday, Friday this week. Tomorrow's show, we're gonna have some leftovers. You know what? I was hoping there'd still be some meat on the bone from Sirianni and from Lurie, and I wanted to go over the rule changes, in particular like kickoff returns and some of those other things. The trade deadline, IR. There's a change in IR. There's a change in replay reviews. Like kind of getting into the nitty gritty of some of those. Thursday.
Yes, the NFL not only trying to steal Christmas by scheduling games on Christmas, but moving the deadline back. They're now trying to steal Election Day.
Yeah. Breaking news. They're calling. They're calling Michigan for a new cornerback for the Lions. Right.
I don't listen. Yeah. Howie Roseman's no fool. This could be an opportunity to take advantage of some of the general managers in the league who might be paying attention to other things on that day.
If Howie's probably gonna look for any edge he can. right?
Yeah.
So Thursday, this might be
I won't
cheesy.
throw in a 5th round pick, but I will give you some exit polling data that I have.
Okay. This might be cheesy. You can tell me now if it's cheesy, and I can reroute it. But I thought maybe like an opening day type theme show where we kind of go over some of the memorable opening days in Eagles history, and we kind of compare Eagles to Phillies, like who's the Bryce Harper on the Eagles and who's the Zach Wheeler on the Eagles and that kind of thing. Cheesy, or do you think that could play?
None of my business. It's your show.
Well, it's our show.
But I'm not there. Do what you want to do.
But still, it's our show. Fun. It's our show. When I'm not on it, I'm watching it. I'm keeping notes. So yeah, I want you to be proud of our show. I don't want you to think it's a lousy product. Anyways, I thought,
my friend.
Yeah. And then Friday, I'm thinking something either draft oriented or we can go to the mailbag. Well,
nice.
It's been some time for it, and I know readers have questions and listeners have questions, and I've been real busy writing like news, and we did all those reactions during free agency, and then we got stuff this week that I haven't done a mailbag on all PHLY in a bit, so I thought maybe we'll do one on the show if it works. So that's kind of those next 3 shows that I've been mapping out.
And Thursday, big day, different kind of opening day, Zach. We got the launch of the Anthony Gargano show.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, 9 to 11. Make sure you check that out, and every day, and you can watch it on demand too, and listen on demand as well.
Very exciting. Got the full roster together. So,
are you telling the audience where you are this week, or no?
Well, I'm in Orlando.
No, I mean, you got an exciting few days coming up here. I don't want to. You can keep it private.
Well, I can't not say it now.
Sure, you can. You can say it's private. Yeah.
No, we're at Disney. I'm taking the kids to Disney. I took advantage of being in Orlando. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I hope you enjoy.
Yeah, thanks. If you see, if you happen to be in Disney this week, give me a hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Okay. That'll do it for this episode of the PHLY Eagles podcast. The close of our coverage from the annual league meetings. Maybe one day we'll tell the story of all the shenanigans that happened last night at the event. Honestly, nothing very interesting.
For Bo, maybe. Yeah.
Nothing very interesting for me, but yes, for you, all kinds of interesting stuff. And yes, I did, in fact, make it to our 6:30 call time this morning with Olivia. Well. Olivia, who got there before either of us, so she was the star of the show.
Always respect to her for that.
No doubt about that. So for Zach and Julia, thank you to everybody for listening and watching and commenting along. We will talk to you tomorrow. Zach and Handsome Rich live at noon. And as always, we love you.
We all silly like the mayor.